So, Job chapter 32. We're going to look at our good friend Elihu and see who this guy is all about. So, before I go any further into this as an introduction, let's go ahead and get the reading in and let Elihu kind of introduce himself, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about this individual. So, let's take a listen here. Job 32.
Chapter 32. So these three men ceased to answer Job, because he was righteous in his own eyes. Then was kindled the wrath of Elihu, the son of Berachel, the Buzite, of the kindred of Ram. Against Job was his wrath kindled, because he justified himself rather than God. Also against his three friends was his wrath kindled, because they had found no answer, and yet had condemned Job. Now Elihu had waited till Job had spoken, because they were elder than he. When Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, then his wrath was kindled. And Elihu, the son of Berachel, the Buzite, answered and said,
I am young, and ye are very old, wherefore I was afraid, and durst not shew you mine opinion. I said days should speak, and multitude of years should teach wisdom. But there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty giveth them understanding. Great men are not always wise, neither do the aged understand judgment. Therefore I said, hearken to me, I also will shew mine opinion. Behold, I waited for your words, I gave ear to your reasons, whilst ye searched out what to say. Yea, I attended unto you, and behold, there was none of you that convinced Job, or that answered his words. Lest ye should say, we have found out wisdom. God thrusteth him down, not man. Now he hath not directed his words against me, neither will I answer him with your speeches. They were amazed. They answered no more. They left off speaking. When I had waited, for they spake not, but stood still, and answered no more, I said, I will answer also my part. I also will shew mine opinion. For I am full of matter, the spirit within me constraineth me. Behold, my belly is as wine which hath no vent. It is ready to burst like new bottles. I will speak, that I may be refreshed. I will open my lips and answer. Let me not, I pray you, accept any man's person, neither let me give flattering titles unto man. For I know not to give flattering titles. In so doing, my Maker would soon take me away.
Chapter 30.
All right. So there we go with Job. And as you can see, in this chapter, what we basically are just getting is Elihu's giving his reasoning for why he's about to say something about the situation. As of right now, and for most of the next chapter that we'll get to in our next Job study, he's not really saying a lot about the issue, although he's going to get deep into it. But what I find that he is doing is he's laying down some information that he's seeing here that he noticed between Job and his friends. He talked about them being justified. He talked about them not being able to convince Job. And when I go through this, and I guess I'm just going to give you my opinion of what he's trying to say, and we'll go through it some more, in the next several weeks, and see if we can figure out, some real understanding as to what his point is. But if I was to put it in a nutshell, I would say that he's trying to let Job know, and his friends know, that you cannot tame God. In other words, you can't turn God into a domestic a God that will act according to your house rules. See, when you bring an animal into your house, one of the things that you try to do, though it's wild and it's not human, it's different, you try to tame it and get it to understand the way you want it to react in your house. And so you begin to do some training and different things. And the goal, though, is to get the animal to behave in a way that's acceptable to you while this animal is in your house. And that's just basically called domesticating or taming of a wild animal. And what Elihu is, I think, trying to get Job and his friends to know is that your attempts to tame God failed. And they will always fail. And anybody's attempt. What we need to make sure that we do is not try to bring our thinking or our ways into a line where we're saying, okay, God, now fall in line to my thinking, fall in line to my ways. But we should always try to make sure that we are adjusting our thinking and adjusting our ways to fall in line to what God is revealing. And that may mean from time to time doing different things, beginning something, stopping other things, starting things new, picking up things that were once thought as useless, and putting down things that sometimes you thought were useful. And all of that is an adjustment and a means of finding a means to line ourselves up with the revealed Word of God as the Spirit of God gives us understanding and convicts our hearts and minds to do certain things. So that's just kind of it in a nutshell. But now let's go ahead and go through this opening discussion that Elihu has and see some of the points that he's making that he considers important. So first of all, the narrator points this out. He says, so these three men ceased to answer Job. All right, so when Job finished talking from his last couple of chapters that we read, and he just went on and he kept, remember we talked about the eye. He had the eye syndrome. And he was talking about all the stuff that how he saw things and what he thought things were supposed to be. And so when he finished talking, and the other three men had no other words to add, it says, because he was righteous in his own eyes, then was kindled the wrath of Elihu. Okay. So Elihu's wrath was, in other words, he got feeling a little like this is not done properly. This was not done correctly. This could be improved upon. So he had some dissatisfaction in what the final outcome between Job and his three friends were. And what's interesting is that at this point, not even God right now, God allows Elihu to jump in. And so let's go a little bit further here to discover. Elihu says, then what, verse 2, it says, then was kindled the wrath of Elihu, the son of Berechiel, the Buzite. Now, when you think about, okay, well, who's a Buzite? If you go back into Genesis chapter 20, and you look at, actually I think it's chapter 22, and you look at verses 20 through 21, you'll see the description of one of one of Abraham's brothers, Nahor, and he has a child called Buz. And so Elihu seems to be a descendant of one of the brothers of Abraham, and therefore he's called a Buzite. All right. It says that of the kindred of Ram, against Job was his wrath kindled. Okay. Once again, he's just letting you know that he was not satisfied with what he heard, because he justified himself rather than God. All right. So the first thing that would pop to my mind is, okay, how long was Elihu here? How much of this conversation did he hear? And my answer is I don't know. But if you would ask me to say, well, what do you think? I would say, well, it's a possibility, keeping in mind of the day and time that this was written, that they didn't have what you would consider like a national newspaper or TV, news or whatever. Information about a town was carried, from one person to the next. And so when word got out that things had happened to Job, people would gather. And it's a possibility that maybe Elihu has some scribe duties. In other words, he's a person that records the information. And that's something that was, something that area or that town or those olden times, olden societies and different cultures, that's what they did. They had people that were there as scribes to collect the data. Now I don't know that. I'm just throwing that as a possibility as to why he might be there. That the true answer is I don't know. But the thing that we do know is he was there. All right, and so he says that he was upset because he was listening to these three men, and he's listening to Job, and he's seeing that how when it was all said and done, Job was trying to justify himself rather than God. Now I think that the ending part of verse 2 says a lot, because when you look at an issue and there seems to be a difference in what God is saying and how I view something, well, then who's wrong all the time? Me. Who's not wrong? God. So that's something that we should always keep in mind. That if there happens to be a discrepancy, there happens to be a difference, and God has something declared, and then I seem to feel something different, well, obviously I'm wrong. That's what makes God God. So what I need to then do is, why do I feel a certain way? Now, you say, well, then what do you do? If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. Well, no, God has told us that we still trust him, even though we may feel a different way. And we trust him by what? By faith. We go through obedience and we operate in faith, though we may not agree or see things the way he has revealed it. And so it's an important thing for us not to say, well, God's wrong. He didn't do this, or he should have done this, or he could have done it this way. And we can go there. We probably have all done that, wondering why God is not doing it the way we want it to be done. Well, the truth of the matter is that God is doing it the right way, the way it's supposed to be. And our emotions and hurt feelings and confusion is part of our dwelling and living in a sinful environment. And so that's what brings the confusion, and that's what brings the heartache and the inability to see what the perfect will of God is. So this goes on, and it says in verse 3, also against his three friends was his wrath kindled, because they had found no answer and yet had condemned Job. All right. Now, it's an important piece too. When you don't know what happened and yet you're still condemning somebody, that's not correct. When you condemn somebody, you condemn them because you know, okay, you did this. All right. If somebody, when you punish a child for stealing the cookies, you need to make sure you know that's the child that stole the cookies. All right. You don't want to be punishing the wrong child, or punishing someone for something else that happened, when the dog or the cat got to it. So Elihu's frustration was also not only because Job tried to justify himself and not justifying God, but the friends condemning Job when they didn't have the evidence to condemn him. Both of those are wrong. So in verse 4, it goes on, it says, now Elihu had waited until Job had spoken. So Elihu is showing patience. Right off the bat, we're seeing some good characteristics about him. He's not barging in. He's not clamoring for attention. He's waiting his turn, because they were older than he. Okay, he understands respect and the ability to show your elder the respect that you do them. He was younger, so obviously he was taught and trained properly. All right, and he's going by the things that he was taught. And while he's looking at and going by the things he was taught, he's watching older people do things that he was taught you shouldn't do. And boy, do we see that a lot, which is why, when you move up in age and you go from being, the younger to being the senior requires responsibilities, because the younger generation will point out hypocrisy in a moment. They will point out, well, you said this, but look at what you're doing. And so we have to be careful. That comes also with living and experience and wisdom, but also a heart to want to do right. Not to just, I want to be right. I want to do right. That's a big difference. Sometimes we just want people to see us, I'm right. Versus, can I find out what is right. All right, and sometimes that takes a little bit of backing up, getting some understanding, getting some information, and not just saying, "Well, I'm right because I just want to be right." And we have to make sure that we try to find truth in the matter, which sometimes is not easy to do. And sometimes people say, "Well, I'm going to just do something and go with it," and I'm not saying that's wrong either. Sometimes you do got to just, well, I don't know what the real answer is. I got to do something. But sometimes you need to stand still and wait for the salvation of the Lord. And you say, well, which one do you do? My answer is, sometimes you do one, sometimes you do the other. Both are a necessity. You need to have the ability to do both. Knowing when to do which one is a skill that sometimes we learn, sometimes we get better at as we get older. And it's always a situation where it's probably not ever for us as human beings an exact science where we always know what to do. But we try. All right, in verse 5, it says, and when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, then his wrath was kindled. All right, so y'all are done, but the issue is not finished. Y'all thought y'all had convinced Job or something? This cake is not finished baking. There's still more things to be added. And Elihu is correct in that. And how do I know he's correct? Because not only does Elihu have to say some things here, but also God is going to come and add to it. So when Elihu finishes up, God's going to say, we're still not done. We got some more things that you need to understand about this matter. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind too, because sometimes we want to say, okay, well, that's the answer. Let's move on. When God will say, no, that's just a phase, and the answer is yet to come. And sometimes when you are ready to just say, well, I think I'm just going to allow it or leave it here, God says, no, pick it back up, and let's go and discover some more truth about this situation. There's a lot of things I can say about that, when it comes down to how we are, our behavior, our ancestry, our family lives, different things that go on. A lot of things get covered over and buried, and we're thinking, well, we're done with it. But there may be times when God says, okay, that thing that you covered over, or that your family covered over, or that your parents covered over, we're going to uncover that, and I am going to have you deal with it now. And those things are usually not fun, and usually not something that you want to do, but sometimes that has to happen. So the situation is not done. They didn't have an answer, and that kindled Elihu's anger and frustration and his feeling of disappointment. And when it says wrath, I don't think that he was fighting mad. I think he was disappointed in the fact that you guys didn't fulfill this. You didn't do this. All right. You ask somebody to bring you a glass of water, and they bring you a glass. Well, they brought you glass, but there's no water in it. I'm still thirsty. You did bring me something, but you didn't bring me what I needed to actually take care of the thirst that I had. And so Elihu was probably feeling like that. You guys have said things, but you did not quench the thirst of what is going on here. And they don't really know. And like I said many a times before, they don't have the backstory. They don't know what happened between God and Satan and the discussion that they had. Oftentimes, like we don't know what God is conversating in the spiritual realm about our lives. All right. So it goes on in verse 6, and it says, and Elihu, the son of Berechiel, the Buzite, answered and said, I am young. So he's emphasizing that again. I'm a youngster. And you are very old. All right, so let me know, you guys are my seniors. Wherefore I was afraid and does not show my opinion. So he said, I kept my opinion to myself. Why? Because I was a youngster. Boy, that don't happen a lot today, do it? Young folks don't mind giving you their opinion right off the bat. They got all of 13, 14 years of experience in life, and they're going to tell you how the world works. Why? Because they got Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and all that other stuff, and they can tell you, and now, granted, is it more information that I had when I was a kid? Of course it is. Yes, it is. But that still don't make it all the right information. It still don't make it all the true information. And there's some information you only get through experience. So that still makes the wisdom of age valuable. It's not irreplaceable in some situations, but in other situations, it's invaluable. So he goes on. He says, "So I said, days should speak, and the multitude of years should teach wisdom." So that's just a very poetic way of saying people that have age and wisdom should speak first. They should give their opinions. They should show forth the path. They should lead the way. And so what he is doing is saying, if you have multitude of years, you should show your wisdom. You should let people see what you have gathered from the decades of living and experience that you have. Verse 8, "But there is a spirit in man." So he's adding to this. "An inspiration of the Almighty given them understanding." So he's saying it's just not the fact that you lived a long time. And it's not just excluded to those that live a long time. Everybody has a spirit. And that spirit is given to us by the Almighty. And that is where true understanding comes from. God oftentimes works through our natural means, but he also works through supernatural means. And he can give experience and wisdom sometimes to even a youngster, where they can be above their years in understanding and in respect and in discipline. All right, look at verse 9. "Great men are not always wise." Great in years is what it means here. Great men that have lived a long time are not always wise. Neither do the age understanding the age understanding judgment. So he's saying that just because you're age don't mean that you fully understand how to process information. You should be better than a youngster, but that don't mean that you absolutely have. Some people have not developed over time and had a different means throughout life and did not gain the same ability to be able to rationalize through certain problems, certain issues, and they still, even though they moved up in age, still need assistance, they still need help, still need guidance. So he goes on, he says, "Therefore I said, hearken to me." Wow. So he's saying now, I think I've been trusting in God. I have the Spirit of God. I believe God gives understanding. So I'm going to say, hearken to me. And he goes on, "I also will show my opinion." So what I like about Mr. Elihu here is he's saying, I'm going to trust in the wisdom of God, but I'm also going to give you my opinion. And man, I could park here, because people don't do that. When people say they trusting in God, usually they say, God told me, or God spoke to me, or God gave me and rather than saying I'm leaning on what I know about God and what I have, and here's my opinion. Because see, what that does is it helps you to recognize I'm giving it to you from my point of view. My godly point of view, nonetheless. But it's still what? My point of view. But a lot of times we don't want to do that. We want to put an extra heavy weight on it and say, the Lord told me, or God showed me, And we saw that with one of Job's friends, Eliphaz, in the beginning. That's how he came off. He was like, "Job, you're going to listen to what I got to say, because I saw this in a vision. I saw God speaking and showing me these things." And he was trying to weight everything he said by putting this artificial, heavy, God told me spirit on his words. And a lot of times people take that as like, oh wow, well then that must be God. If they say God told him, if he said God showed him that in a dream, then that must be God. And what I like about Elihu here is he's saying, I have a spirit of God, and I know God speaks to me, and I know God gives me understanding, but I'm going to show you my opinion. And man, I like that about that. That's one of the beautiful things about this book of Job is it really breaks down how we relate and how we should relate and how we need to correct some of the ways we relate. All right? And because what that does is it lets you know that, yes, this is my opinion. This is how I see it. Now, my opinion could be right. You see, that's the other part. Just because it's my opinion, don't mean that it's not correct. All right? And so that's another thing that, once again, when you flip it, sometimes people say, well, you're just giving your opinion. You're absolutely right. It's my opinion. But that don't mean I'm wrong.
Right.
All right? And so that's the beauty of opinion. Because if you're wrong, you don't got God on. Because see, when you say, God told me it's going to rain on Wednesday, and then it don't rain. Now, you don't make God a liar, which we know he don't lie. So that means that, so, but when you say, I believe, or it's my opinion, then now you've given room, okay, for your own human inabilities to be the problem and not God. But a lot of times we don't do that. All right, but he's going to come out with a few more other things. So like I said, I like that aspect about his opinion, and that's something that you keep in mind as you're thinking about what he says as we go forward. But let's also look at what he's going to say here in this next verse. He says, "Behold, I waited for your words. I gave ear to your reasons, whilst I researched out what to say." And I also highlighted that word "searched." He says, while ye searched out what to say. All right? So, trying to discover, trying to gain information is an important piece too. All right? And so, I think that's something that we should not just overlook. Verse 12, he goes on. "Yea, I attended unto you, and behold, there was none of you that convinced Job or that answered his words." All right, so what he's saying is, I've listened to what you did, what you said, talking to his three friends. And I can see why Job didn't agree with what you said, because you were not able to convince him. Because you were trying to say things from your own tradition and from your own points of view. And trying to tell Job that you know what happened. And they kept trying to tell Job that he did something specifically to cause his problem. Which, once again, we know the backstory. That's not it. That's not what happened. But we do know that everybody is born in sin, and therefore we all have the opportunity to get snared by an attack by the enemy, right? Because we're living in that situation. When you are in the Pacific Ocean and you floating around in there, you become a target for sharks. That don't mean that you're gonna get bit, but you are a target because you're in the ocean. And because we are in this world of sin, we are a target of Satan. And he will continue to float around, look to see how many times he can get and bite. And this Bible describes him as somebody that's he told God, he's going around seeking whom he may devour. All right, so he's like a lion going around, trying to find someone and that's just because we're living in this world. All right, but the friend said, well, no, Job, you did something on purpose, specific, and that was not correct. All right. And so Elihu points that out. And then he goes on, and verse 13, it says, "Lest ye should say, we have found out wisdom, God thrust him down, not man." Now what he's saying is that you guys are trying to understand this, but what you need to recognize is for whatever reason this happened, God allowed it to happen. It ain't got a whole lot to do with what Job may have did or how he did. It was God allowing it. And that's something that, now as to why God allowed it, well, that's going to always be a mystery. Maybe God will reveal it to us, and maybe he won't. But it's God that did that. So what you have to do is understand and trust that God has measures and reasons and comprehensions that we can't understand. So then what do when we can't understand it? We talked about this before. That's when we just have faith. We just trust God. I don't know it. I don't get it. You know, I might feel disappointed or might feel frustrated because I want it to happen another way. But then I got to maneuver my own emotions and maneuver my own feelings so that I'm not feeling anger towards the Lord, because I know He can do all things. And a lot of times that happens. All right? And so he says in verse 14, he says, now he that hath not directed his words against me, neither will I answer him with your speech. Look at 15, as he connects that. He says, they were amazed, and they answered no more. They left off speaking. All right? So, even after Elihu said what he said thus far, and after Job said what he had to say, the three friends had nothing to say. No answer. All right? So now he's waiting, and he's like, okay, you guys still got nothing to say? All right, so look at 16. He says, when I had waited, for they spake not, but stood still and answered no more, I said, I will answer also my part. I also will show my opinion. That's right. So he said, now I'm going to, once again, I got something I want to say. I have an opinion. I got a point of view that I want to share. All right. Verse 18. He says, for I am full of matter, and the spirit within me constraineth me. So when he says he is full with this is basically saying that Elihu wanted to say things a long time ago. But his training and his respect for his elders, as he so eloquently pointed out earlier on in this chapter, told him, no, you wait. But as he was waiting, he was getting fuller and fuller with things he felt he wanted to say. That speaks a lot to us sometimes about the ability to hold our peace. Sometimes we can't. And we're going to see here that Elihu, in just a bit, Elihu's going to talk about how he felt like he's about to bust. But the ability to just hold your peace. Man, I want to say something so bad. But learning to wait. And if you can do that, you may end up like Elihu, being used by God, and the fashion that he's being used, and he's here written in the book of Job. He's recorded. All right? But he waited. Look at verse 18 we just read. He said, I'm full with this matter. His spirit can't contain him. Look at verse 19. Behold, my belly is a wine which hath no vent. Now, a wine that has no vent means that when that expansion happens, the bottles get what? It gets tight. And usually, it says, it is ready to burst like new bottles. All right? You ever see one of those pots they have where they have those sealed lids on it? Pressure cooker. Yes, exactly. He basically said, I feel like a pressure cooker. And he said, I got all this steam built up in me, and he said, fortunately, I got enough wisdom to have a vent. Although it feels like I don't. And he didn't pop, he didn't blow up. But if you got one of those steel pressure cookers and you don't have that vent open, that thing's gonna blow up at a certain point. All right, and so, but that's something that we have to make sure that we don't do, because we are like that sometimes as human beings. We hold and we hold. When we don't, and we know we need to learn that our vent sometimes is just giving things to God, telling God about it. Not always I got to go tell somebody. I got so much built onto me. I got to go tell somebody something. I got to go give them a piece of my mind. Sometimes just give God a piece of your mind. Tell God what's on your heart. Speak to the Lord. Let the Lord deal with your situations. All right. So he goes on and he says in verse 20, he goes, I will speak. Actually, let me go back to this verse 19. I wanted to make sure I brought this part out. Jesus talked about that, about our relationship, when he says that when we are transformed, we can't try to put God's ways in our thinking, because it will not fit. It will cause our old thinking to blow up. He says you can't put new wine into what? Old bottles. All right. And so when I read this, I was thinking about that, what Jesus said. So if you're going to take on the things of the Lord and the issues of the day, you need to have the Spirit of God, which will help you to vet the problems of the day. Because the problems that you're going to run across, if you go through them in your own means, it can cause you to just swell up and when you get swollen up and pressurized and God forbid, if you got a pressure cooker and that thing is tight, man, help the guy that comes over there and tries to unloose that thing. He's going to get steam all over the place. And sometimes when people come around, they try to unhook the steam and the frustration that's built up in you. The person that's trying to release the pressure is often the person that gets burnt by the pressure. And so what we have to do is try to learn not to do that. And that's what Elihu is saying that he's trying to do here. He's trying to let out the pressure properly. And that speaks to us even to the day. All right? And so in verse 20, he says, I will speak that I may refresh. I will open my lips and answer. So he says, now I feel like I can open my mouth and I can say something. I can say something and communicate and not have to blow up. I can take my time and share my opinion and not feeling like I'm upset at any of the other guys, not upset at Job, just trying to give the truth. Just trying to bring out how I see things. All right? And then he's going to, in these last two verses here, he's going to talk about how he's going to deliver the truth. Now, these last two verses here are important because it's going to talk more about his style of conversation. See, your style of conversation is important. Are you attacking? Are you argumentative? Are you debating? Are you instructing? You know, I have to fix myself sometimes because my nature is a fixing. When I'm talking to people, I'm always trying to talk in a matter of trying to fix something. When I had to learn that conversation doesn't always have to be about how to fix something. It can just be share, conversate. You know, just talk about what you're feeling without trying to say, well, this is how I would do it. I think you need to do this. Always trying to fix it. So I had to try to learn how to not always be a fixer and try to just be a person that can just conversate and share and give, you know, points of view that are not designed to try to say, well, this is how you should do it. And it wasn't always easy. And when I say that that's how I was, it's not like, well, I'm not like that anymore. I will probably always be like that. But I come to the point where I recognize my style. I know how I can be. So try now to conversate without always trying to say, well, this is what you need to do. You know, and try to refrain myself from doing that. All right? So therefore, I can just begin to share and dialogue in a normal way. Well, look at verse 21. It says, let me not, I pray thee, accept any man's person. So he says, now I'm going to talk, but I'm not going to talk in a way where I'm going to talk to people that benefit me. I'm not going to benefit if one of those guys that were Joe's friends was his boss. Well, I'm not going to try to talk to appease my boss because my boss pays my paycheck. I'm not looking for anybody that I can get benefit from. So my conversation is not going to be leaning towards a person that can give me a benefit. So he says, let me not, I pray thee, accept any man's person. In other words, I'm not going to be worried about who you are. Neither let me give flattering titles unto man. So I'm not going to worry about what your personal or what you can actually personally do for me. Nor am I going to try to flatter you and try to make people feel good, just because I want to try to make you feel good in the means in which I'm trying to say and make my point. I feel if I can make you feel good, then maybe you'll agree with my point. That's not what he's going to do either. And sometimes we have to watch how we do that. Sometimes we can compensate in a way that, well, I want people to agree with me, so let me say wonderful things about them so that they can agree with me. And that's not good. See, when you want to say wonderful things about a person, say wonderful things about a person because you want to say wonderful things about them, not because you want something in return.
Right.
And that's what flattery is. So I'm going to say, well, I like this person. He's really nice. You're a really good person. You do all that. But when it's all said and done, I'm saying it because I'm trying to really get something else out of you. Rather than me just saying it because that's what I think. I think you're a good person. I want you to know it. And leave it like that. But oftentimes, conversation that we have, not only amongst us, individuals, when you get into family, and we see it all the time in politics. My goodness, you can't do one thing without getting somebody else coming around and say, well, I'll say this if you say that. And you can see what kind of a mess that makes, right? But he says, I'm not going to be talking with any flattery. So look at he says, for I know not to give flattering titles. In so doing, my Maker would soon take me away. So he's saying I wouldn't be here having the ability to discuss and to share what I'm about to share. God would just remove me out the way if he knew I was only going to just add a bunch of flattery. Because that's not what needs to be added to this pot of confusion. We already got 3 friends that had all different kinds of motives. And then we got Job try to say, listen, I don't care what you might want to say. It ain't my problem. It's God's problem, which is not true either. So Elihu is going to introduce himself, and the next chapter, which we're not going to get into now because we don't have time to finish that. But he's going to start itemizing some more things that he's going to talk about, and then he's going to just get started in the next chapter talking about some of the things before he really gets into it for the next 3 or 4 chapters. And we'll get a chance to hear this gentleman's point of view. So we're going to stop there. I know we're a little bit early, but I think that's fine. There's no problem with that.